today we're discussing a very unique topic, the role of D&I, diversity and inclusion, in digital transformation. This is broad. And I know some panels have touched on it. When you think of diversity and inclusion, you think of women empowerment, you think of youth, but we want to change that conversation today. And just to anchor on some facts, I know digital transformation has been defined in full. I want to just bring some facts. Kenya at the moment has a GDP of 5.2, but also an equally high unemployment rate, which is currently going to even increase by 10%. Also at the same time, the GDP growth is being contributed highly, 10% by the ICT sector. Then we ask ourselves the question, what are the gaps? What is stopping us from having this digital transformation conversation? Digital skills have been mentioned. Understanding the transformation journey has been mentioned, where business models, culture, customer experience has been also referred into. But then again, do we understand diversity? What is diversity? Appreciating the uniqueness of an individual. What is inclusion? Seeing the best, or taking those differences of that individual and using them as to your benefit or to bring the best in your organization. With no further ado, allow me to introduce the panelists. These are powerful women, movers and shakers, and I'm truly honored. Today I looked at myself in the mirror and I asked myself, are you ready to discuss with these women? So I'm really looking forward to learning from them. So I'd like to call to the floor, and I hope we're mic'd up, Phyllis Migwi. Please give her a clap. Is she here? Okay. As we wait for her, so I'll pause. Damaris Mabea, are you mic'd? Please come. As she comes, Damaris is actually the youngest panelist I have on board. She's 26 years old. But she is a co-founder and executive director of Aminia Dada Innovations. Aminia Dada works towards the promotion, protection, and realization of inclusive digital rights for all, and especially girls. She was also recently appointed as a Generation Connect Global Youth Expert in the summit by the ITU, UN Telecommunication Agency. Please give her a big clap, and I'm truly honored to have her in the panel at that age. Keep 26 in mind as we go through the questions. Please have a seat. Phyllis, as you come, are you my runaway panelist? Phyllis Migwi, Country Manager, Microsoft. Over 14 years of experience, and I have the pleasure to also call her my friend. Risen through the ranks, big on development, team building, innovation, change, and you could tell by the comments she gave. And I am truly honored. And Phyllis, I found out something I didn't know. In 2007, you formed a company for coaching, and you were only 20-something, very young, and you could see that girls needed to be mentored. So congratulations. My third panelist, another mover and shaker, Michelle Kuria. Michelle Kuria is the regional head of marketing at EFET. 9+ years of experience, strong and passionate on CSR and giving back to the community. Responsible for developing marketing strategies, digital marketing, brand communication, and we are honored to have her here. Alicia and I can hype as well. Thank you. Finally, Faith Nkatha. You have your mic? Okay, good. Faith is a country manager at Cellulant. She has 10 years plus experience. She is also big on positive transformation of business and people with digital revolution at the core of it. Please come on board. Truly honored to have you. So to kickstart this conversation, I'd like to pose my first question to Phyllis. So Phyllis, and I'm old school, I wrote down my question. In your opinion, what is the role of diversity and inclusion in digital transformation, considering it requires inclusion of many forms?
That's an awesome one to start with.
Thank you.
And I say that because I feel like we've been having the diversity and inclusion conversation from one end. So tying that to digital transformation for me goes back to understanding our culture, understanding who's in the organization. Now, when I look at our organization, and allow me to just take the context that was set for us earlier, Africa is now 1.4 billion people, which is nice and good. Yes, there's many of us, but do we know how many of those are young people? The numbers right now vary. It's about 60 to 70% of that population is young people. So when we now start thinking about inclusion, we're actually looking at that demographic. And I like to say to people, youth is no longer a segment for me. Youth is the African identity. So when you're doing digital transformation, that is the basic foundation of what I'm doing and what is driving the kind of transformation we should have. Now, why I say this is an amazing question is when I then look at the African population, diversity and inclusion is not just do we have enough women at the table. We need to take it beyond that. I need to now start having conversations with organizations on what are you doing about accessibility. How many of us, as we're doing digital transformation, actually are looking at the differently abled population that we have and actually making sure whatever solutions we're building include those people and bring them to the table.
Thank you. And that's a good way to go to Damaris. And interesting because Damaris is more or less also a beneficiary of the D&I initiatives. And she told me this morning it's easier for her now than it was for us then. But Damaris, how do we create an impact with D&I, especially given the unemployment rates of the youth between 18 and 34 years of age?
Wow, thank you so much, Eve. What am I supposed to say after Phyllis speaks? I mean, but I say with so much humility. Okay. I say this with so much humility that I stand on the shoulders of women trailblazers who have made it easier for us to be able to have a voice and to get this platform to start. So for me, the fact that there's so many women who struggled and broke the ceiling has given us that confidence to get into STEM, that confidence to know that it's possible to get the voice to innovate. Because once you look at unemployment as a crisis, then you're totally incapacitated. But the moment you're able to think within yourself, what are you able to do? Lots of people ask me, what did you study? How did you start dxNOVA Innovations this year in April? Get the Kenya Red Cross to fully fund it, the entire launch, and they're not a donor organization. How did you talk to them? What strings did you pull? What did you do? Who did you know? And for me, it's not about who I know or who. It's just talking to people and selling the idea. The humanization of ICTs is what has gotten me here. So it's really looking beyond ICTs as one sector, but it's cross-sectoral. So if you're discussing digital transformation, the idea is every sector of the government, of the economy, of whatever you're doing, whether it's health, agriculture, education, has that aspect of digital transformation if you allow it. So I always, when I talk to the young people, some who are even younger than me, because even 18-year-olds, they're asking me what career should I take to get to where you are by the shortest time possible. I'm like, guys, it's not even about that. It's really following your passion. You could study, you could do big data, AI, IoT, and all these things. But then if you don't relate it to how much impact it can raise, then you've missed it.
And I'd like just to nudge you a bit. Please tell us about Aminia Dada. Tell us about your journey, because we're also here to listen. And I'm sure there's a lot of us here who would go away with something inspirational from you.
Okay. So this is an initiative that I began. I'm the founder. I'm the executive director. I'm the web manager. I'm doing the website myself. I'm the intern. So the only staff that I have is a team of volunteer women. Some who are here, who are my board members. I have a lady from South Africa. I have a lady from Romania. I have a lot in Europe and all over. And all these women, they have made it possible for me to get here. So I look at all the women in this panel and I'm thinking, potential. So for me, the reason why I started this is because I felt young women are so intimidated by tech, because I work mainly in the informal settlements. So if you're talking to young women in the informal settlements, they have lots of fears, even about just logging into a meeting. Everything is so scary. And so how do you debunk that? How do you talk to a young person to get online? And then when they get online, how do we ensure that they are safe? Yeah. Then once they are safe, how do we also practice cyber hygiene? As you practice cyber hygiene, how do you transform the digital ecosystem so it keeps going and going and going? So if you don't make them see the sense of how it's going and how they lose out, then you've already lost them. So you cannot just sell an idea, you have to sell the entirety of it for someone to believe the process. Like you see the way we normally say, you can trust the process, but the process doesn't trust you back. Yeah. So unfortunately, that's one of the challenges that I felt I could put myself of use, and I'm so glad that you asked that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Damaris. And also, as just to pick up from there, it's a challenge to the men. It's just that not the women sitting on this panel. I'm sure there are also men there also who make, because when you look at DI, we're looking at also probably multiple facets to it, as Phyllis said, looking at demographic, age, gender, access to information, literacy level, all these things. Yes, you want to say something, Phyllis.
You just landed at the one conversation I absolutely love.
Yes.
So, and I'll move away from my broad description of gender and diversity that I gave earlier, specifically to the gender piece of it. Now, the reason I believe we haven't been successful is because we've been having this conversation without actually telling the men what is expected of them. So someone said earlier, and this was with reference to the board, that we need to be able to speak the language of the board members so that we can pull them into the digital transformation journey. Guess what? We also need to speak a certain language to get men subscribing into this vision and get them participating.
Sure.
And so the challenge I'll throw to this audience and to all of us actually is this conversation is not specific for the women who apparently seem to have made it, for them to be the ones who are making room. It's actually a responsibility for all of us to make room. And when we bring in women to the table, we're not bringing them in so that they can be like us. Diversity and inclusion means I actually make room for them to come in and do something new, to bring new ideas.
Yes, thank you, Phyllis. And that's very important because that's anchored on biases. They could be inherent, it could be confirmation biases. And the next question is to Michelle. Michelle, however, on top of those biases, are we aware of the biases? And you call them, not being aware is an unconscious bias. Are we aware of those? And what's your take on that? And what can we do to be able to overcome those and move the journey in the D&I initiative?
I think when it comes to bias, it's one of those things where you learn as you go on your self-awareness journey.
Yeah.
So again, when it goes to something like unconscious bias, to you it would seem like it's something, it's something normal until someone breaks it down to you and explains to you, this is why this is a bias in the way maybe you're thinking or you're carrying out an activity, or even just in terms of like what Phyllis has mentioned, accessibility.
Yes.
Because we need to remember, even when it comes, I'll use differently abled people. When it comes to doing things a certain way, they're wired different, but that doesn't make them different.
Yeah.
And you see, in terms of that, that's an unconscious bias because you have visible and you have invisible ones. So with a visible person, I can tell, okay, maybe you need a bit of help. We need to create a ramp, so to speak, for your wheelchair to go up. But what about neurodivergent people? So that I would say when it comes to bias, it's more about your self-awareness and your self-awareness journey. one of the things that I tried to do when it came to confronting some of the biases that I have was that I took a look at the will of power and privilege.
Yes.
And it's an idea that was developed by a lady named Sylvia Duckworth. And as much as it's created in a, I would say, white privilege context, it was good to look at it and try and create my own will of power from an African perspective. From a Kenyan perspective. When it comes to, I would say, education, when you're applying for a job sometimes, your recruiter might have an unconscious bias in the sense they may be looking at someone from Nairobi as more educated from someone from the village, or if they went to Makini, for example, and not Moi Primary. But when it comes to them and their abilities or their skills to the job, they're better qualified people up there. But your unconscious bias does play a part in what happens. So I think just your self-awareness journey, getting to understand your biases, it helps a lot.
Thank you. So having listened to the three women, Faith, I come to think whether we have metrics in place. As an organization and as a woman in leadership, do you have KPIs? Will the KPIs ensure D&I remains authentic? And what do I mean? Will we just be checking a box as organizations to say, to meet this D&I, to look nice, let's hire a black woman. We don't care if she has the skills and the competencies, mix her in and look nice. But if you can speak to that, for each person, do you have something in place that where you say, what's the metric, what's the KPI per individual on D&I?
How much time do you have?
Just go.
I'm talking.
I have to stop you.
Maybe I'll start by giving a story because I liked what she was sharing. This year I had an opportunity to travel to Sweden, and it was an interesting leadership program. I encourage everyone in the room to go for it. And one of the things they did, it was one of those leadership programs where you're not spending time learning how to make more profit, how to lead a winning team, the usual. It was very interesting because it focused on you. And on one of the evenings, we did dinner in the dark. I don't know if anybody has experienced that. And in doing that, they were trying to help us deal with biases. Because so many times, you think you don't have biases, until you're in that person's shoes, you don't know how it is to be on a wheelchair until perhaps you sit on one. And so during this dinner in the dark, if you know me and know how Christian I am, you can only imagine how I walked in, just canceling the powers of, kind of thing, until I was inside and they have someone walk you in and you had to touch around to find your glass, pour your water, and it was like a 5-course meal in the dark. Totally changed my mind. And when I came back to the office, one of the things I did when I started with HR was that, this whole diversity and inclusion thing, we have to make sure that as leadership, we are getting to sit, in the seat of, our staff members. So one of the things that we did, like even this year, the last time I remember doing that was in banking, but we had, during the customer service week, we had our leadership sit in the contact center, at those random hours, because you just hear there's a contact center and these guys are working this sort of hours, but, just being able to sit in those shoes. And that leads to your question, because I think so many times when we think of diversity and inclusion, firstly, we think gender, which Phyllis talked about. We think about age. But are we thinking about education?
Yes.
If you think about the boards, that we have, I was reading some report that was showing that we have diversity up to 37% now, from like a 21%, and I think it's good growth for us as a country, being at 37%, but if you check most boards, like top of mind, who sits on those boards? It's guys who've done audit, finance, and things like that. A lot of the people in this room who are techies and things like that, that doesn't appear in the board. So when you think about matrices, I think it's being able to measure this sort of things. Whatever organization you're representing, are you able to check how many people sit on the board? How many are women? How many are men? Are we checking age? I was reading a report that was saying the average age of people in Kenyan boards is like 46 years.
I'm not sure if that's true because I sit on a few boards and, it should probably be something different, but I think that's something that every organization should check. The second one is to check aspects of what's driven from the leadership point of view. What's the EXCO driving? When we put down our KPIs, are we checking those sort of strengths in our leaders? Are we... There's something called psychological safety, which has been proven to really drive aspects of diversity and inclusion. Is it okay for me to say, I was telling the ladies I'm sitting next to, it would help, since it's a panel of ladies and we're in heels, to have like a guy, standing here, or another lady, to help us up these challenging stairs, But, it's those sort of things. But am I comfortable to say that where I'm working, And the other thing is, are we doing enough research? Are we putting word out, asking this sort of questions, so then people can come back and be able to give this sort of feedback, and they can be able to say, okay, we are 37%, globally it's 21%. So maybe we are not too bad. So how do we encourage more women? So I think it's those sort of aspects that would help. And I've seen, maybe just to give a short example about Cellulant, we just launched our culture code. And some of the things that we did before we launched it was to have people in groups and openly share what they're not happy about. The long meetings that we have, maybe having more women in the tech team. Our EXCO is okay. We are now at 50-50, so not too bad. But just asking those sort of difficult questions. And then as we put together our culture code, it has diversity in mind. And that has really helped just make sure everyone is comfortable and, every person's needs are met, so to speak.
Very true. Hold that thought, because I'm itching to ask you about policy, but I want to ask Damaris a question. Given your journey, how comfortable are you now speaking about your background without fear of being judged or prejudiced?
Wow. You're on it, right?
Yes.
Now I feel more confident in the sense that there's that respect that comes with the field towards women, and I'm not just talking as a woman but also as a youth. The reason being, there's lots of initiatives that have been placed and lots of campaigns that have gone into it. So as you know, any good thing has that effort behind it that's been done. So again, for me, there are still challenges, there are still hurdles and steps that you have to go through, but focus. Focus. So telling my story is not really about me. It's about, when mostly I don't even like talking about myself. I want to just talk about what I'm doing, what I'm working towards, how we can partner, how we can collaborate. So once again, my story is not significant because now I can say I'm somewhere, right? At least I've had an education, I'm able to do something. So I would want to tell my story from a place of impact towards others.
Fantastic.
Then it makes sense backwards, It's like right now, the reason why I was actually, for the past 9 months, I was working from home fully without any sponsor, without any donor. But I can tell you, Eve, the amount of support I've gotten is incredible. For the past 7 months, I've traveled. I've gone to Rwanda for the World Telecommunications Development Conference as a digital youth envoy. I've gone to the African Union as a youth envoy as well. I've gone to, last month I was in Bucharest for the ITU Plenipotentiary Conference, whereby we had the first woman to be elected to the ITU after 153 years. The ITU is the oldest UN agency. And you can imagine it took that long for Madame Doreen Bogdan Martin to be elected. So just being there and seeing how much she put into having the youth be present was really very special for me. Next week I'm going to Geneva for the same meeting as an ITU fellow. So my story is not really about me. It's about what a small grassroots organization can do at an international scale.
Nice. And
Thank you.
I like what you're saying because it's also giving you exposure, experience, and brings now Phyllis is Microsoft, is Phyllis doing enough as a woman to have, what you call inclusivity entrenched in the training programs? Is there something that you can tangibly say?
Phyllis, can I take that before you do it? Actually, I was looking at the sponsors and Microsoft and Liquid. Somebody from Liquid here? Yes. Microsoft and Liquid are ITU sector members. So take it.
Thank you. Phyllis, go.
Well, thanks for that. But I'll actually take it from the context of where we're seated.
Yes.
So, Kenya, Africa. Are we doing enough? I think there's a lot more that we can do. And specifically because you kind of went into the skills conversation, let me speak about work that we are doing in that space. So the obvious ones that have been in the news is what we're doing with the ADC, with Catherine seated here. So we've gone out, we've gotten engineers, but beyond the fact that we recruited from the market, we are actually now working with universities, and there's programs that we have around skilling. For those programs, it's both, yes, as they grow through the university, but also having conversations in some of those universities. And I was at Strathmore yesterday in terms of looking at the percentage of graduates for some of these courses. Why are people not taking the courses that we say are the jobs of the future? So driving that conversation and looking at how we can help. That's one side. I said earlier, when I think about diversity and inclusion, it's not limited to just the gender conversation. It goes beyond that. One of the programs that we run, and I tell my team we run it quietly for a very long time, is actually skilling for a group of people that most of us don't think about every day, and that's the refugees. They've been displaced, moved from their own countries, they're seated in a camp somewhere. But Microsoft has for years now, I think it's about 5 years, been working with these refugees to just make sure, even while you're working with the agencies on how they can move forward, they're actually developing skills. And these are skills that help them when they get out of those camps, when they finally moved to a place where they can have a stable home. So that's one way that Microsoft is doing something. The other one is the accessibility conversation that I brought up earlier. Just making sure that our tools and solutions actually enable those who are differently abled to interact with the same solutions. One of the things that I love, and this I discovered when I joined, when I had full use of the capabilities, is the captioning and actually being in a presentation where, for someone who doesn't have sight, it describes the image. I found that so cool. It actually describes the image, so all of us in the room are actually engaging with the content in the same way. So there are some of those things that we're doing. It's from the tooling side, the initiatives that we're doing, and within our skilling programs, both from ADC, we also have the Africa Transformation Office that was launched last year, and within that, we're looking specifically at how because we have a target to enable SMEs and startups. How do we take some of this tooling that we have and work with the startups as they're building new solutions so that they're also driving that diversity and inclusion conversation?
Thank you. We didn't rehearse this, so Phyllis, actually my next question to Michelle was, how well do we cater for colleagues with disabilities? So you kind of almost touched on it, but I'd like Michelle to address this, and feel free to be as creative.
I think when it comes to differently abled people, I think Phyllis has managed to summarize it quite well. But I think also still it comes to also tackling bias, and something very common that we have is tokenism. And we don't discuss tokenism a lot, where we believe if we hire a certain percentage of women or we hire a certain percentage of differently abled people, then we've done our part. When in actuality, when they get into the organization, you do not give them any tools or resources or support or the power to sit in decision making or in group discussion. And I think that's one particular bias that we have to deal with, because when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we can't only focus on getting into the door. Not getting into the party. We also have to give them, it's the DJ playing the song. Oh, what song do you like? Okay, this is the song you like. Okay, let me play you this song. And we rarely tend to do that. So you find that a lot of DEI programs are focused more on fulfilling the HR aspect of the HR aspect and rather than the organizational aspect. Yet it's been proven time and time again. Diverse organizations foster innovation, they foster creativity, something that was brought up by the good prof when it comes to culture. So I think that.
Thank you. Faith, policies of D&I. Are we there yet? Are organizations able to be accountable and offer support? Please take that.
That's a good question. One of my mentors is in her 60s, and she explains to me how when she first got into the workforce, and even before she did, how challenging it was for her. And she says how when she wanted to get into Strathmore, she had to get a letter from the government allowing her as a girl to get into Strathmore, and then thereafter, getting into the workforce. And she's like, it was so difficult for her getting to the top, and she couldn't wait for the day she could get to the top to be able to influence policy. And so I think when we think about policy, then it then begs that diversity and inclusion, must be there at the top, and the people at the top must be thinking about it. And when I say the top, who do I mean? I mean the board, people sitting in EXCO. When we think about corporate governance, do we have policies put in place? Are we thinking diversity and inclusion? And how do we disseminate that to the people at the bottom? When we are putting together, whether it's HR policies, what do we have in mind in that line? And it's interesting that in most organizations, I'm tending to sound like I read a lot, but one of the reports I was reading was saying that 30% profitability increase is seen in organizations, governments, and even countries that are led by women. Like, that's to say, if you have, and that's just gender, we haven't talked about diversity in terms of age and aspects like that, but just having that sort of diversity in government, in countries and organizations, then you see a difference. That goes to show that the policies shouldn't just be in corporate. For the people seated on this panel or in this room, it means tomorrow the cabinet secretaries and permanent secretaries need to be thinking that way. Our good president needs to be thinking that way. Like every role you get in as a leader, you need to be thinking, how do we put this in place? How do we make sure, and I said diversity is not just gender and age, even aspects of education, professional experience, religion, all these things that are pertinent to just diversity are put in these sort of policies. And it's difficult, and I think it has to be sort of a fight, so to speak. And tomorrow, if you're having someone mentor you, it needs to be that they also inspire you to continue that fight. So then that way it can be put in place, So those are my thoughts here.
Thank you. I'd like to pause and just ask the audience, anybody with a question, burning question or comment? Okay, I've seen. Okay. Start queuing. Yes, please go.
Hi, my name is Ivy Kashero. I'm the Territory Manager for Secure Works. I'm quite passionate about the conversation, and I just wanted to put comments and ask some of your thoughts on this, because I've had similar conversations in different forums, and one of the key things I raised in one of the forums was, I'm glad that one of the panelists mentioned that this conversation is fundamental to have a man in the conversation. My growth in the cybersecurity space has been primarily because of the support of men in the space. I've had men sponsor me. I've had men mention my name in rooms, and that's the reason I would say I've managed to get the opportunity to grow. And so every single time we are having this conversation, nothing against dx5, but I usually say it would be great to have the men who've sponsored women in this space be on the panel to say what is it that they've seen, what is it that they are looking for, and why do they support women in this space, so that other men can listen from the same frame of mind.
Sure.
Since we're talking to a language that the people we want to listen can understand, I believe this conversation would be best driven by men. We've had this conversation as women in different forums. The reason why we haven't had success, I usually give the analogy of when a couple is having issues and the lady goes to complain to her girlfriend and then comes home and the man has no idea what he got wrong.
Sure.
So this conversation having men makes a difference. And then second is, I know we've made a lot of progress in STEM and having a lot of women come through this system. And we've also seen a lot of tremendous growth in senior leadership positions with women in there. But what happens in the middle? And I don't want to, I'm of the opinion that this is not a corporate thing. I think it's a social and cultural thing. And I don't think men don't get it. I think men do, because men support their children. They want their girl children to thrive. And if that's the case, if this concept is being understood in the home, then this conversation should be easier to transform in the workplace, so that when women get to mid-level, because when we're talking mid-level, I'm making assumptions that at this point, age group is between 30s and up. That's when most women are in this space. And you find out that this is where women fall off. Why? Social and cultural implications. So it's difficult to continue. And those that get to the top fight to get there. So how do we solve this issue? Well, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a very strong point. I was also mentored by a man. Let's take yours and we'll respond to both of them.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ivy. So I think from a DX5 perspective, I think you're absolutely right. We do need to have more men, because there's two sides to the story. And I think even as a mum, you want to know how to bring up your boys, right? So you have to be able to speak that language. But one of the things, this topic is I'm very passionate about it, but one of the things that I really believe is it's a very personal topic. And I think the problem that we all make is that we make it a corporate topic. It is not a corporate topic. This is a topic of leadership. And in fact, this panel is unique over the next 3 days. It stands on its own, head and shoulders, because we're talking about the people that are on the panel and who they are as individuals and how they are leading us forward in terms of DE&I. In my personal opinion, D and E completely fall away without I. Inclusivity is the beginning and the end of everything. You can't be diverse if you're not inclusive. You can't have equality if you're not inclusive. So the question that I have for you guys is, from a personal perspective, and Mish, you mentioned it very briefly from an awareness piece, but from a personal perspective, in your corporate world, what are you doing as individuals to to be more inclusive, to be more aware of your unconscious bias? Because let's face it, unconscious bias can start with a name. You see the name Kelly, and you formed a perception, right? Whether we like it, and especially in Africa, because we've got so many different dialects and so many different languages, and so that it can start at that level. What are you guys doing in your individual capacity to engage with your teams, to engage with your customers around inclusivity? And what are you doing every day? Give me something practical that I can take away and go, okay, I'm going to start thinking about doing that.
Thank you, Kelly. So before the team goes, because I think each of you can share, I'd like to respond to the First Lady. I forget her name. That's a very, Ivy. That was a very strong point. And if you follow this discussion, we really try to steer away from having women-man bias kind of discussion. And we appreciate the fact that we have men sponsors, even us sat here. But I think there's something that I just want to provoke as a thought. When I look at inclusivity, I look at attitude, I look at access to information. I look at influence, ability to create that influence and partnership and communication. So I believe we're more than open as well to have further conversations. And hopefully next time we have a man panel. I know we had one man who didn't show up, but it would be nice, and I'm sure that he's taken. But please, if you can respond in order to Kelly's question as your 1 minute. I think I'll answer both together. I think I'm always conflicted anytime I'm speaking about women because I'm raising 3 boys at home, and so I'm always like, what? As I empower these women, are these boys empowered? And I can't agree more about having the male mentors and the male sponsors, and I agree 150%. And to just personalize it a bit, I think why it's okay to have a women panel is that I think our stories are not told enough. We were just talking with Catherine, and we're like, are there all the girls who need to hear these stories hearing them, and what can we do to make sure they get to hear these stories? That they get to hear that, like my nanny just quit yesterday, and my child is graduating today. Those sort of stories, and yet I have to show up at a board meeting. I have to show up at this panel here. To just be able to hear that yes, we are going through all these things, and we're still showing up. So I think there's still the place of the woman strongly and solidly. Like one of my aunties says, to sit properly on that seat and just still say that, yes, we're going through those struggles, but we're still showing up. So I feel there's a place for both, and we still must be able to empower these young women coming up. And I think it's that place that we didn't get to have. Maybe most of us didn't get to have all these people encouraging you as women, to come up. I love that she said she's had women, to stand on her shoulders, but it's fantastic to be able to have that. And more to your question, Kelly, on a personal front, women is a passion of mine, and probably if I wasn't doing my day job, don't tell my employer, that's what I'd be doing. In my previous life, I was doing a talk show, speaking to women, and it's a passion of mine because my journey has been interesting, and I'm in the process of writing that book. Just the struggles that you go through as a young woman who gets into leadership very young, and so these biases that you're talking about, where people say this young girl, and you're referred to that way in a meeting. One of the things I'm passionate about, I say it in every panel I sit on, don't serve tea, because I've been put in that place where, everyone is looking at you in a board meeting to serve tea, and you're like, my friend, we are all here and we're the same level, so perhaps let's all serve our own tea. Or, the thing about being able to have courage to raise your hand and disagree. And no offense to the men in the room, but I don't know how many of you ladies sit in a board and there's just this way of, I can be talking and a man just speaks louder and they're able to get heard. So learning the skill of now also speaking louder, those sort of things. And so that's my personal journey, being able to walk with women. I'm walking with 12 ladies and walking with them through life, not just about work, and just being able to have conversations of how they can win in those sort of battles that make up the full corporate woman who's a mom and, an auntie and a sister and all those aspects. And finally, and this is very close to my heart, I'm part of a network that pushes for women on boards. Yes, it's called Women on Boards Network. And we're pushing for diversity in terms of professional background, diversity in terms of education, and diversity in terms of age and gender. Because again, majority of the people we have on boards don't cover that. And if we have a lot of the large organizations getting that sort of diversity, I think we begin to win. So we are training senior executives, we're training women who have sat on boards to just make sure we see that change. Yeah, I think that's my personal journey.
Thank you very much. Michelle, I see you, Ian. Just a closing remarks.
I think I like what Ivy brought up. I think it's actually a valid question. I've been to many forums where, unfortunately, the female conversation, allow me to use that term, has been on the outskirts of the conference, of the main conference. This is actually one of the first ones where we're sitting in the same main hall and having this conversation. Secondly, I think when it comes to also having the conversation about, how men and women behave at home and in the corporate world, what you'll find is, and I'll speak from personal experience, I have a conscious and unconscious bias in how I raise my children when we're at home. But if you ask me to replicate some of the things in the corporate world, I probably wouldn't. Yeah. So, I'm just being honest. And that's one of the conversations that we have to have. I'm not a man myself, but I can imagine. I am empowering my girl child in the house. I'm affirming her, I'm supporting her, I'm boosting her. But I'll go to the office and I'll talk down to a female colleague. It happens. So it's one of those things where you also as a person, as Kelly has rightfully mentioned, diversity and inclusion, it's a very personal topic. But I like that we're now having more conversations about it. And it's not just about men and women. It's also about differently abled individuals. I mean, you talk about intersectionality. I could be black, I could be queer, I could be... Yes. You know, there's so many different personalities that make up one person and their experiences when it comes to this DI conversation. But it doesn't take away from who they are, you know, as a person. And for Kelly, you know, for your question, it's actually a very interesting question. Having come into tech, I'm not a techie, by the way, guys. I've been in tech for about 3 years now, and walking into a field where everyone is talking in huge acronyms and you know, you find yourself in a presentation and you're just like, what is everybody saying? Now coming into this, DI became a huge passion of mine. And personally for me, what I do is I try to attend a lot of trainings, both in and outside of work, to get to understand the concepts. I also like, and allow me to mention Hanovation, which was a prelude to what dxNOVA is now. Hanovation was my introduction to women in technology. This was something that CIO used to do, and I'd like to thank Laura for actually starting that and giving, you know, women an opportunity to actually have these conversations and to see it evolve and grow and to be a part of it. It's a really great feeling. So for me, from a personal perspective, it's a lot of trainings, both in-house and out, in work, and also just a lot of internal self-reflection and just looking at my journey as it goes.
Okay. So, Phyllis, 1 minute, then I'll ask Damaris a separate question.
So I guess starting with Ivy, and I won't tackle whether there should be men here. I think I said there should be earlier. And the role, society, and why we still have this as a challenge. I think there needs to be a very decisive action for us to all have this conversation, not from a win-lose position, but from a win-win. So that we are able to actually, all of us, come to a place where we understand the woman, having strong women, making sure that these girls know who they are, know what they bring to the table, doesn't take away from the boys, and them also knowing who they are and what they bring to the table. The more we build the two, the stronger our society actually becomes. So for me, that is going to be key to actually unlock that, so that we stop having a situation where I believe there's been this thing of you can't have it all. Says who? If the man can have it all, I can have it all. So there's a definition that we've had as a society that we need to break. And part of that is let's stop seeing building up the woman's identity as taking away from the male gender. No, it's actually the stronger the two are, then we get the full capacity our society has to give. Now, to answer the other question, what do I do on a daily basis? I'm huge on growth and development for all my team members, and I have quite a few of them here who were pulled into speaking without consultation. I'm big on giving opportunity. So for me, inclusivity means actually opening the door, making sure that I pull you into the room, making sure that I pull you into the conversation. Male, female, I want everyone in my team to grow. So there are people that I am intentionally pushing, and across the two genders, I'm intentionally pushing on a daily basis. I need you to be more visible. I need you to participate in this meeting. So for those of us who are in positions where we have some level of influence, I think the other responsibility we have is to actually open the door. Doesn't matter which gender, what definition of diversity we are looking at. Just make sure you open the door.
Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. Do you want to go on that same one?
Yes.
Take it away.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say to Ivy, there are men who support women and they support women's initiatives, but they want to remain at the background. For their own personal reasons, they don't want to come forth with it. Maybe they feel, okay, how can I be seen sponsoring such, Just take it and keep quiet about it. Or I'm not about the clout or anything. It's not part of what I want to do. I'm just doing it out of a good heart. And please don't even mention me on your sponsors list or anything. So there's also that aspect. There are men who are good to women, they are good people, but they are not necessarily, they wouldn't come out and say, you know what, I advocate for this, I champion for this, or I want to push this agenda. So there's also that aspect of understanding where people are and journeying with them from exactly where they are. Then on to Kelly's question. I can tell a story about this initiative that I'm running. So it's about leveraging technology as an economic empowerment tool, and I'll speak faster to consider the time. So my apologies to anyone with any, deficiency on that. I'm so sorry. So I had an event. I got sponsorship from W4 Under Equals, the banner with GSMA, with W4. So they gave me an activity funding. So I held the activity at the Boma Hotel. Then I brought some young women. And this is not speaking from a position of privilege. This is not meant to shame. This is meant to direct the conversation towards the humanization of ICTs. So the ladies came. Then it was prior to the campaign period. So they just told each other about it. So wakajazana, unajua unaambia tell a woman, wakaitana, then they just attended the conference as a political meeting. So I ended up with a number of more women that I had the budget for. Then, because it was a half-day meeting, that meant I told them to come early to have breakfast, then we'll have the mid-tea, then the lunch, then we disperse. I had some funding for their reimbursement for their transport, so that was catered for. Now, what happened at around 9 after having breakfast at 7, because the session was starting, I think some of the ladies, some of the young girls were hungry. Then they were young, like from 17 to around 23, thereabouts. So they went to the other conferences room, like you see the way we are here. Then they went to the other rooms. Then the food that was there, they started grabbing the food. Then they were hiding it in their hoodies. They're hiding it under their sweaters. Then going to the washroom to eat the food there. So I was the MC for the day, and the principal secretary for ICT, the good lady, Madam Esa Koimet, was the chair. So I was just trying to balance everything. Then the staff come at me, they're like, who is the head of this? Who you Aminia Dada Koapi? Who is the head of this thing? Then they call me to the side, they tell me, who are these people? Who are these shady people? Why are they taking food from the other conference rooms? So I was embarrassed, and am I on?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I was embarrassed, and I was like, goodness me, so how do I even handle this? So I asked them, what are they taking? So they told me, they're taking samosa, the meat and stuff, and the chicken and everything. So I told them, please hurry up and bring the snack now, because we can't wait till...
No. Time.
Yes. So I'm sorry. So that changed my mind in the sense that even as you discuss this, please consider. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Please consider. Even as we discuss this, kindly consider the fact that we're journeying with people from where they are, and that should inform our programming. So instead of me getting angry with that story, I now had to consider, okay, how can I bring etiquette, as a topic? Because I was focused on we are going digital and financial literacy skills, then economic empowerment, then tararara. So I had now to reinvent and be like, okay, we are dealing with a person, just looking at the whole sum of somebody. How do you deal with them exactly?
Thank you.
So
thank you, Damaris. Sorry, I have to cut you short. We've really run late. So thank you so much. Please clap for my wonderful panelists. Thank you so much for being so attentive. And before they get off stage, I believe Ian has something. So as we walk off stage,
sorry,
Ian...
I've been standing here for
You
so
have?
long.
Oh my God. Please ask.
So long,
I didn't
but
even
it's okay.
Please ask.
That's fine. That's fine. So my name is Francis Kamuyu from MultiChoice Kenya. Just a bit of context. I love this conversation, by the way, and that's why I've been standing here.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. That's fine. So, two things, and I like the way we've discussed it. One, diversity and inclusion. The moment you're having that conversation, it means there's a failure we're talking about. So, if there was no failure, we wouldn't be discussing that. Let's stop thinking about it as a women thing or a youth thing, because if there is lack of diversity in an organization, it's not just the women. You'll find the youth will also be uncomfortable, people with disabilities will also be uncomfortable. So don't look at it as a diversity issue. It's actually fundamentally a people issue. So it's a much bigger strategic problem that needs to be addressed. So that's number one. Number two, I feel this is the moment for women in ICT.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel this is the moment for women. And let me explain why. And I hope I'm not misunderstood in this. When IT started out, it was a lot of hardware and cable pulling and all that. And, staff women are not interested in, quite honestly. And then after that, what happened? Then we started talking about process improvement. We started talking about now project management.
Yeah.
And what happens with project management and QA and QC and training? Now women started coming out. I mean, they thrive in those kinds of setups. Now, where are we now? We are talking about translating business and IT. And women are very good at that, that communication skills at those levels.
Thank you.
So, to end, I know you're very, yes. So, my point right now is, I want us to stop thinking about this siege mentality that, women are against, men are against women and all. This is the moment for women. As women, you need to swap your minds. You need to stop thinking about this as a problem and start thinking about what are the risks now. Yes, because you have a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
So, and the biggest risk you have, those who have risen so far, the women in tech, all of you here and the rest, you are the best in your, you are the best team, the best people who could rise, right? When it's very difficult, only the best rise to the top.
Thank you. Allow me to cut you short, but thank you so much. I'd like to end this. And so, my ladies, please follow this way where Ian is standing. He has something for you. Thank you so much for being honest and open and engaging. Really appreciate that.